Let's do this.
I knew I got something wrong. Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daily Devotion with Beez. I am your host, Beez the Chaplain, and I just want to say, I hope everyone's off to a great start to the day. Though the weather is not the best, like let's be honest. Well, in my opinion, the weather yesterday, the day before, over the weekend was beautiful. It was like beautiful sunny days, and once again, now we've got this kind of dank, humid weather. Like it's still hot, but it's like humid hot. You know, it's like monsoon season styles, or not monsoon. That's a bit of an exaggeration because monsoon, I think, is more about the rain than it is about the humidity. But so I'd probably say it's like Mauritius styles or Singapore styles, where, you know, when it's that overcast day and it's raining, but it's still like hot. Anyway, enough about the weather. I'm gonna get straight into the devotion, and this morning's devotion is actually, for me personally, quite interesting because I titled it "When Sin Becomes Salvation," and I guess the reason for this, the reason why I put it out there this way, it's I want to elaborate on the title, and the title is "When One Man's Sin Turns into Another Man's Salvation." Now, the passage we're going to look at is found in Jonah Chapter One, specifically verse 12. We're going to highlight that verse, but we're going to actually read the entire chapter. The reason why I'm getting into it straight away is because, well, it's not a lot of reading, but there is some reading. So I'd rather get through the content of the word and then ramble, not ramble, but just talk about it. But yeah, let's focus on this one first and foremost. Okay, so we're going to start from Jonah Chapter 1, verse 1. I'm reading from the NKJV, and then I'm going to just share some thoughts that really help me. Okay, it starts off the book of Jonah, and the first title, a little subtitle in the NKJV here, says Jonah's disobedience. So all of a sudden, straight off the bat, we're not off to a good start. Anyway, it says, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah arose. So first part he got right. Good morning, Jai. Good morning, Mom. Good morning, Izzy. Good morning, Jai. And then it says, so God's telling Jonah one thing is to get up, do something, arise. I've given you instruction, follow the instruction. I've given you a mission, go. And not Jai. Come on, Jai. And Jonah, you think the first part it says, so Jonah got up, but Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So straight off the bat, this is Jonah committing sin, right? And this is, like, for me, what's interesting is sometimes when we talk about sin, we talk about doing bad things. We talk about doing bad stuff. I'm going to let you know now that this is sin. And it's like, oh, what? Did he rob did he steal, or did he did he kind of scam his way to get a ticket and not pay the fare? Was he being dishonest? No, let's understand. From the get-go, the intent for Jonah was to separate from God. The intent for Jonah was to get as far away from God as possible. And it says it twice, or 2 or 3 times. It's saying Jonah did not listen. He arose. It said, but he arose to flee from God, flee from the presence of God. And so the intent there was to sin. Like, there is no, did he steal to get onto the boat? Did he lie to the people? No. Because ultimately, sin is the separation between man and God because of man, right? And so for here, straight off the bat, this is sin. We might look at it and say, well, technically, he didn't really steal or cheat or whatever. The first thing, when it comes to the commandments, it's love the Lord your God, right? And listen to God. Jonah, the first intent, the first thing he wants to do is reject the instruction of God and remove himself from the presence of God. He's choosing to sin. he is sinning and he's separated from God. He's choosing to. It's an impossibility, but he's trying. Anyway, it says he paid the fare, went down into it, got to go with them to Tarshish, so the presence of the from the presence of the Lord. And I hope I'm saying I thought it was Tarsus, but it's Tarshish. And the way that I'm saying it does not sound right. Anyway, let's continue reading. And then it says, but the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. So God has a plan, and God is saying, I'm going to send this storm, and I'm going to see what you're going to do. And it says, then the Marines were afraid, and every man cried out to his God, or his own God, or the God that he worshipped. So technically, he might not have, like, it was like there was super. Okay, let's just keep reading for now. And on top of that, they threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest part of the ship and lain down and was fast asleep. This is, I would say, trying to escape God to the best of your ability, right? In the natural realm, in the physical realm, right? God is saying there is neither height nor depth, east to west. You can't separate from me. So what he tries to do is, he goes, well, consciously, if I can't separate you from this presence, I'm going to try and separate from you in my mind. And I'm going to go to sleep because hopefully you won't be there even in my mind, right? And he goes to the deepest part of the ship. And deepest part of the ship, trying to escape what's happening in the external world. He's trying to get away from that, and he tries to go to. And it says he's fast asleep. And then it says here, so the captain comes to him and says to him, "What do you mean, sleeper? Like, hey, what are you doing? Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will consider us, so that we may not perish." If you were to parallel this story of Jonah in the boat and then Jesus asleep in the boat, there are so many parallels, but yet this one's going in completely different directions, because we've got one man of God who is actually rejecting God and fleeing from the presence of God and intending on, keeping his distance and trying to keep himself completely away from God. And then compared to the other story of Jesus actually being God in the boat. And then you've got someone saying, hey, we need this circumstances beyond us, and we need the power of God to help us. So the captain comes down to Jonah and says, hey, sleepyhead, wake up. What are you doing asleep? Right? Do you not believe in a God? Because we all do. Right? And that was the thing. I believe that everyone, especially people on the sea, whether it was mythology, whether it was myth, legend, superstition, they had gods and they were worshiping gods. And it said every man was praying to their gods, because it's like, ultimately, if there's a time of death, or there's an opportunity where I could die, or the circumstance where I could die here, and the circumstance is beyond me and it's out of my control, I'm going to try and reach out to a higher power. And then the captain comes down and says, you shouldn't be asleep. You should be reaching out to your higher power as well. So whoever it is, you make that effort and try and make right with God, with your God, or try and call your God. And then it says here, and they said to one another, come, let us cast lots that we may know whose cause this trouble has come upon us. So who's to blame here? The reason why we're in this circumstance, this wind and this wave, or this tempest came out of nowhere. So someone's done something wrong here. Someone's to blame here, and we're going to find out. So they cast lots. And it really shows that though they didn't believe in a God, they believed in powers beyond them. They believed that it's like, well, someone's going to send a sign. Someone's going to give us a direction, or someone's going to provide us with answers, because we don't know. So there was this reliance on, a higher power, but they just had different versions of it. And then it said, so they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, please tell us, for whose cause is this trouble upon us? What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? And it's like, so at least we know what the deal is. Because if he's angry at you or if he's angry at us, we want to know why, right? So we can do something about it. So he said to them, I am a Hebrew and I fear the Lord God, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. So he's saying, okay, this is who I am. And he's confessing to them who he is, right? And then it says, then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, why have you done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. So he confesses not only he serves a powerful God, but he's not on speaking terms with God and he's fleeing. So the penny drops for the sailors and says, well, that's why we're in this situation. Your sin. We're in this circumstance because of you. Your sin has caused us to be in this circumstance. We had nothing to do with it. Actually, we're innocent in this. So now we realize what's going on. And this is where it gets very interesting. It says, and then he said to them, sorry. Verse 10. Then the men were exceedingly afraid. Yep. Then verse 11, it says, then they said to him, what shall we do that the sea may be calm for us? For the sea was growing more tempestuous, or more, it was getting worse. The storm was getting harder. It's like, well, what do we do now? What do we do? And they're asking Jonah, right? They're asking Jonah. And what I like about that is that there's this trust in Jonah from the men. Because it's like, it's your God. You have a relationship with him. You know how to appease your God. So do it, right? And for me, I'm starting to see that there is faith from the Marines in the God, but through Jonah. And then Jonah provides the answer, and that was the highlight one. Jonah Chapter 1, verse 12. And it says this, and he said to them, pick me up and throw me into the sea. The sea will become calm for you, for I know that the great tempest is because of me. So Jonah, what I like, and we're not going to talk about the story of Jonah right now. We're just going to talk about his sin. So now there's this acknowledgement of sin. And this is the thing. It's not a sin out of ignorance. This is a sin, like a conscious decision to separate from God, right? The choice has been made and he's like, I'm bouncing out of here, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to Nineveh. I'm going to go to Tarshish, the furthest way from God. Knowing full well he's doing all this all the time, knowing if things are going to go wrong, right, around him, it's going to be because of him. And he's acknowledging that. And then finally, when the Marines are like, what do we do? He's like, you know what? Just throw me overboard, because the last thing I want to do is put you in the drama. So throw me overboard. It'll come for you, because this is all on my responsibility. This is all my fault. Not my responsibility, my fault. Right? I've sinned against God. Now it seems like everyone's paying for the consequences, or everyone's dealing with the repercussions of my sin. And so they didn't need to hear anything else. They didn't want to negotiate with him. He's like, oh, so you're the reason, and you've acknowledged you're the reason, and you're telling us to throw you overboard? Laters, and they pitch him overboard. And it says, and they said to them, nevertheless, the men rowed hard to return to land, but they could not. For the sea continued to grow more tempestuous against it. Therefore, they cried out to the Lord and said, we pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not charge us with innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. That's where one man's sin becomes another man's salvation. It's interesting enough that before they launched this brother overboard, they prayed to God. They prayed to God for a clear conscience. They, in their own effort, tried to save Jonah. They were like, okay, and this is something I'm just realizing on this spot. And you got to appreciate these guys, because though they were superstitious, though they were serving other gods, they still had love for Jonah in the sense that they didn't want him dead. They didn't want him dead. So they were like, well, let's keep trying. Maybe there's another plan. Maybe there's another plan. Ultimately, they're like, man, you're right. And your God is not going to be satisfied until we do what you say to try and sort this situation out. So they pray to God and they say, hey, give us a clear conscience in this. we're going to be obedient to you in your direction through your prophet, or through your messenger Jonah. And so when they turf him overseas, and immediately the waves calm and the sea calms, it's a lot of the faith that has been invested in God, a lot of trust that has been invested in Jonah, all of it is validated. All of it comes to fruition, and they're like, the brother was right. And the power of this God, hey, he's not playing. And so what they do is they acknowledge in that moment that God is who he is. It's this, because of this man's sin, they realize and they see the transforming experience in this circumstance. And it's interesting because, like, what I find interesting in this story is that it's not a testimony. It's not, this is what God has, where I was beforehand, this is what God has done in my life, and this is where I am with God now. It's, okay, I'm like, it's a different story completely. For me, it's a brand new idea of finding salvation because someone else's sin. It's not someone else's testimony. It's the acknowledgement that this is what has happened because I rejected God. This is what has happened because I separated myself from God. And then the impact that has on one person, or the Marines, when that gets separated from there's this acknowledgement of who God was. There's this acknowledgement that salvation is found in God. And I guess the proof of that is in verse 16, when it says, the men feared the Lord exceedingly because of their own experience now, not because of what they might have heard about the God of Israel, not what they might have heard about the God of, of the one true God who made the dry land in the sea, but it's their own experience now. It's like, because one guy messed up and chose to separate from God, it's impacted me. And I've now got an experience of that. And God has made himself evident in my own experience in this circumstance for me to cause me to fear God exceedingly. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. And vows in the sense of, I'm acknowledging that you are God. That's a vow. It's not this, I promise to serve you and worship. It could be, but the first thing is, I acknowledge who you are. I acknowledge what you've done. I acknowledge what you have the power to do. And they sacrificed, and basically they worshiped God. Because of one man's sin, the Marines found salvation in God. For me, that was a really interesting idea, because that's in the midst of sin. That's not that's not testimony time. This is where, well, this is my life. This was before God. This is after God. This is me in the midst of my sinning, right? Having that impact someone else, and then me acknowledging my sin and saying the way that I'm going to do that is to reconcile with God. I think the silver lining on this story, and I think the thing that's praiseworthy in this story, is that Jonah's acknowledgement of sin and Jonah's desire to reconcile with God, even in that struggle. We talked about struggle yesterday. Even in the midst of that struggle, Jonah was like, I am obedient to God, even though I'm kicking and screaming. I don't want to go to Nineveh. My desire was to run from him, but I don't want to hurt you, and I am the cause of this. So I'm going to try, and I'm going to take my wrestle so it doesn't impact you anymore. And because people witnessed that wrestle, because people witnessed that and found salvation in that, once that wrestle no longer impacted them, they worshiped God. It's really interesting how that can happen. It's really interesting, the authenticity and the transparency and the genuine wrestle that Jonah had with God and the impact it had on others. So much so that people ended up worshiping God because of that experience. I guess the thought that I wanted to leave was, sometimes we think that I need to make myself all good and all clean and all perfect before I can share my testimony. But we can also, this is what this story is teaching me, that we can trust God and know, even in the midst of our sin, he's working in the background so we can be, in our brokenness, in our mess, a blessing, a potential blessing to someone else. that he is working in the background and revealing himself to other people through our journey without us even knowing. And that's what we can trust in. That's what we can rely on. That though we might be messing up with God, though we might be messing up big time and sinning with God, that he's still working in the background to bless others, to reveal himself to others, and using us, our brokenness, our mess, our dramas, to be a blessing to other people and to provide salvation to other people. And for me, that it's a really humbling experience. It's like, it's not even about me. It's about what God can do in my mess for other people. Because at the end of the day, all Jonah did was acknowledge that he was to blame and say, what I need to do is make right with God and things will be okay for you. For me, that's a different style of testimony. That's a different style of worship. That's a different style of transparency, authenticity that's being showcasing, when it comes to the Christian experience. So for me, I guess the word of encouragement is, though sometimes we're wrestling and struggling with God, and it might overflow into the lives of others, we can still be faithful and know that God is still using that experience to be a blessing to others, to draw others to him. I think what we need to do is remain humble and just say, yeah, it's not about us. That even in the midst of me and God not being right, God is still using this brokenness, this terrible relationship, this circumstance, to be a blessing to others, to be a lesson to others, to be a drawing card or an opportunity for others to see him, to see salvation found in him, to see mercy, grace found in him. Yeah, weird devotion this morning, but I think it was really powerful, a great eye opener. I guess to end, I think it's because sometimes we need to be proactive in our testimony. We need to be, I got to share my testimony. Nah, just share transparency, just share authenticity, just be real with God and be real with the people around you in your relationship with God, and trust that God is doing and working in the background to be a blessing not only to you, but be a blessing to others around you so they can be drawn closer to him. I'll end it there because, I'm satisfied with that. And I hope you are too. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for another day and another opportunity to worship you and connect with you and be filled by the Spirit. And Lord, I thank you for the story of Jonah, that we can see that. We can see that as a snapshot of a man who was sinning and separated and chose to intentionally separate himself from you. And the way that you were able to use that experience to not only provide salvation for him, to reconcile yourself back with him, but to be a blessing and hope and salvation to the other people in that story, the Marines, the captain, and the people on that ship. And Lord, I pray that you have the power to do that, that others are drawn to you and worship you and give sacrifices and offerings to you and make vows to you, even in the midst of struggles, dramas. So I just pray that you continue to bless and guide us and reveal to us the opportunities that we have to be that. Lord, I've ruined the prayer. But I just pray that we continue to seek you more and more every day. So irrespective of whether we're proactive in our testimony, that you can still be a blessing to us and others. That's all right. I ask this all in your loving name. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Devotion with Beez. I am your host, Beez the Chaplain. Thank you for joining me on Instagram, on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, all live. I will be here tomorrow morning for another Daily Devotion. In the meantime, it's a muggy day, but hey, stay safe, stay blessed. Peace out. Much love. Later, Jai. Oh, and for the people on the other three, hold on, I got this one for you. Boom. It's an ending thing. Don't worry about it.